Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, where hunters new and old come to learn and find inspiration from stories of hunts gone by. Everyone is welcome to enjoy the outdoor way of life, and there is no better time to start than right now. So let's head into the great outdoors with your host, Dylan Ray.
Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, as always, presented by our good friends over at ScentLock. ScentLock, in my opinion, everybody makes good clothing these days. I'm not saying that. I mean, camo is camo, right? Grandpa killed deer in his flannels. But what I will say is in the BE1 series, that toolkit for bow hunters is just a super complete toolkit. And the carbon technology for maximum odor absorption is what, in my opinion, really sets ScentLock apart, especially in the whitetail woods. I would highly recommend you go check it out. I've got a good friend of mine from here in Kansas, the great state of Kansas. There's only 4 good people in Kansas, and you're one of them.
You know it.
I've got Nick Dieker from Nick's Knife Works. Nick, how are you, man?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. I don't get the pleasure of having people in studio often, which is just, it's a lot better that way.
Yeah. I would prefer it that way too. Talking on the phone is not near as fun as talking face to face.
It is not. It's not near as it's not near as engaging. It's not near as fun. We don't get to shoot bows before.
Yeah,
that's what's the fun part.
Yep. And I can get your facial expressions and see the disappointment in your eyes looking back at me.
You can see when I fall asleep.
Yeah.
Most people can't.
Yeah.
No, my favorite part about Zoom is when like a guest will see my video cut off and they're like, "What happened?" I'm like, "I just had to run pee," and I'm in there peeing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Just keep talking, you're good." All that gets edited out,
sure,
but it still happens.
Yeah.
No, man, it's a pleasure to have you. We had, have you ever heard of, well, I can't ask the guest, but ceviche. We just had some ceviche, which was phenomenal.
It was very good. I had never had it either.
So,
nor had I ever heard of that before.
Me neither. It's because we're dumb rednecks. But I caught some crappie a long time ago, 3 years ago. Caught a whole bunch of crappie. And I'm good friends with, his name's Mike Casanetta. He's one of the top 10 chefs in America. And he said, "Well, why don't we try some ceviche with it?" And I'm like, "Because I don't know what that is. And if I can't spell it, I don't eat it."
Yeah.
And he's like, "We have to, dude." And I'm like, "Whatever." And so he puts this fish in a bowl of lime juice. And I'm like, "Dude, I can get down with some soaked lime, like soak some fish in lime, yeah, and then let's deep fry that mug." and he's like, "No, this is cooking it." And I'm like, "To heck it is. That ain't cooking nothing." And he said, "No, the acidity of the lime juice will actually cook the fish. So there's no heat involved, there's no fire involved, there's no grill involved." I'm like, "Oh, but there's some hot oil that we're gonna drop it in and fry it, right?" And he's like, "No, there's nothing. This is cooking it." And I'm like, "I don't know about this." And anyways, so basically you use the acidity of lime to cook this fish. And I fell in love with it. I'm like, "Dude, this is phenomenal." And so last week, went out with a buddy and we tore up some crappie. First person I texted was Mike, and I'm like, "Dude, I've got crappie." And he's like, "Let's do it." And so you came over tonight and we had some Mike Casanetta ceviche.
Yeah, and it was good. I was very impressed.
It was decent. If he's listening, I can't give him a big head.
Sure. I mean, you got to keep him humble.
Keep him humble. Yeah, I think Food Network took away his humbleness when they said you're one of the top 10 chefs in America.
I could see how that would happen.
No, so I wanted to have you on, man. Recently I stumbled upon your knives. I was getting home. I'd been on a hunt in Oklahoma and was chasing some whitetails, and I was with our buddy Aaron Zeesh. And we get home, it's like 2 a.m, and you know Aaron never shuts up.
Right.
Like, even when everybody else is tired, like he's the dude in camp that's like, "Oh, let's play one more round of cards," you know? And you're like, "Aaron, shut up, it's bedtime." But anyways, we had just gotten home, and I was wore out. And he's like, "Dude, have I ever showed you these knives?" And I'm like, "What knives?" "No, you haven't showed me anything." And he pulls up your page on Instagram, and he starts showing me your knives, and I'm like, "Holy crap. Like, these are phenomenal." There's not much that gets me woken up at 2 a.m. after a hunt, but knives will do it. And so I start looking, and as I hold one now, and I was looking at them, I'm like, "Man, these are phenomenal." And I just had to get a hold of you. And then I find out that you're a traditional bow hunter, and I'm like, "Well, if you're going to hand forge knives, you're probably a traditional bow hunter." It's just the only way to do it.
Sure.
And so I wanted to get you on, man. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I'm super thrilled. I have I've never been on a podcast before, and so this is a new experience for me, but I'm excited about it.
Well, has anybody ever told you got a face for radio?
I don't know as if anybody's ever told me that, but I would believe it.
No, I'm excited. We shot some bows beforehand. We started talking about your kind of journey into traditional archery.
Yep.
What did that look like for you? Because I know a lot of guys, I get that question all the time.
Yeah.
Of how to make the switch from a compound to a recurve. And if you do, how do you bounce back and forth? Let me just say this. It's a hard thing to do to bounce back and forth.
Yes, it is.
In my opinion, especially trying to hunt back and forth. You told me some really interesting stuff about kind of the transition, and so I'm curious to know how'd that go for you.
Yeah, so just to simply start out by saying that for whatever reason, I had a kind of a natural draw towards the simplicity of it. Just it was something that I always wanted to do, even at a young age, but I didn't because, my dad taught me hunting. And he hunted with, trad bow years and years ago, but
Right.
Then he shot a compound. He set me up with a compound, and that's just the way we started.
Yeah.
But something always drew me towards the simplicity of a stick and a string. And I think
It's the same thing that draws you to making your own knives.
yeah. There is some crossover there. But I think I was a sophomore in high school and was strolling through one of the, I can't even remember the name of it. It was one of the kind of off-brand sporting goods stores on Kellogg there. I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, and there was a longbow on the shelf, and I couldn't keep my eyes off it. All I was there for was some arrows or something else. But at that time, I started making a little bit of my own money. I had some money to spend, and I saw that bow, and I just could not take my eyes off of it. And it was a Martin the Stick. And it was
The Stick.
Yeah, it was a really small, short, little longbow, which was fine for me at the time because I was young and wasn't quite the same size that I am now. And I bought that bow and just started playing around with it. And I played around with it just for fun for years and years. And eventually that became my bow fishing bow. And so I shot tons and tons of fish with that longbow. And that's what really taught me how to shoot. But over time, I just was determined I wanted to hunt with it, not just shoot fish. And I was nervous about it for the simple fact that I didn't feel confident to make an ethical shot at any amount of distance. Because when you're shooting fish, you're shooting 5 feet.
Especially when they're in the
7
koi pond
feet.
in the backyard.
Nah, I never
Mom
did that.
was super mad.
Never did that. Attempted, but never did that. But yeah, shooting fish is super close range, and it's a snapshot. It's really fast,
No
really
control
close,
to it, yeah.
and you just it's more about quantity than quality. Whereas with hunting, you make one quality shot, not 1,000 quantity shots like you do bow fishing. And so anyway, that was what really got me started with a stick and a string. And eventually I started trying to turkey hunt with that bow, which it was a shorter bow, so kind of worked for being on the ground. And tried to turkey hunt with that for a long, long time, unsuccessfully. But then I started working at a bow shop for a few years, about three and a half years, local bow shop, and had access to a lot of different bows and shot all sorts of bows.
Might I add a phenomenal bow shop too.
Yeah.
Big Bear dealer.
Super great bow
They carry
shop.
a ton of scent lock.
Yep.
I know I was in there not too long ago, and they do have what, in my opinion, is the best bow that Bear made this year. And the compound line is the Alaskan, and they had 2 of them in there. So go check them out. El Dorado.
Yep, El Dorado, Kansas, Sutherland's Outdoors. And so while I was working there, I started playing around with all the bows and kind of towed the line, dabbling in both worlds, so to speak, between traditional and compounds for a few years. And building confidence the whole time, starting to play with it more in the woods, alternating back and forth, which, as you mentioned, very difficult to do. And one season in particular, I actually carried both to the stand all season. I carried a compound and a longbow with me to the tree stand on most every deer hunt. And I felt really silly doing it, but it was just a choice that I had made, that I wanted to be able to take that shot if it presented itself at less than 20 yards. But if a shot opportunity presented itself beyond 20, I wanted to be able to capitalize on that too.
Absolutely.
But
I did the same thing as a kid when I made the transition to bow hunting. I would carry my bow and my rifle.
Yeah.
And then I got really mad because I was shooting all these deer at 40 yards with a rifle.
Yeah.
And my dad just straight up said, he's like, well, dude, as long as you keep carrying that rifle, you'll never shoot one with a bow.
Yeah.
Because the first time they get to 40 yards, you're popping them. You got to wait for them to get to 20, 30, 31, whatever. You got to wait, and you'll never. And the same is true, and that's why it's such a dangerous game. Because I mean, if you dabble, you'll shoot a lot with your compound, and then you'll be like, why not shooting any with my recurve? Because you're shooting them when they get to 30 yards with your compound, instead of waiting for them to get to 20.
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Go
No,
ahead.
you're good. I eventually did take a doe at 18 yards with a longbow, and man, I tell you what, those traditional archery teeth sunk so deep into me in that moment. I was like, my adrenaline spiked higher than I think it ever has in my entire life.
For reference, what year is it? How long ago was this?
This was, I think, 7 years ago. And I was over the moon excited about that doe. And it was a great shot. She only went like 35, 40 yards and crashed, which was shorter distance, mind you, than I think any deer I had ever shot with a compound, which shocked me. Just the fact that the blood trail and the lethality was so much better with that big cut-on contact broadhead and the setup that I had at the time. So anyway, shot that first doe, and I was hooked. I was all in on traditional archery from then on. There was one, I guess you could say, one season between then and now that I did pick up a compound. My wife was very pregnant at the time, and we were expecting a child right in the heart of deer season. And I knew that my chances of hunting that year were going to be very, very brief. And I had talked myself into taking a compound. And I did. And I shot a doe with that compound at 55 yards or something like that. And it just felt wrong. Like it did not feel the same. The doe that I shot with the traditional bow prior to that dwarfed that experience of shooting that doe with a compound after the fact. And I just, from then on, I knew I could never go back. I sold every compound I had. I sold every accessory that I had. I sold it all, and I committed 100% to traditional archery and never looked back.
Well, and that's your answer there. Like, if you ask somebody, when do you know to switch? Or I get that question all the time. How do I know I need to switch? If you no longer feel the excitement of shooting an animal, you need to do something different.
Absolutely.
And be it, our friend Aaron, he switched from a tree stand to spot and stalk to get that feeling back. No matter what the switch is, but if you no longer feel that euphoric high with a rifle, it's time to pick up a bow. If you no longer feel that euphoric high with a crossbow, time to pick up a compound. If you no longer feel that euphoric high with a compound, it's time to go to a longbow. And I don't want to say we're chasing highs, because that's not why we hunt. I don't want to start getting hate mail about, oh, you just hunt for your excitement and your joy. No, that's wrong. But I still
But you'd
want.
be lying if you said it wasn't fun, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's why we're doing it. It's fun.
100%. I mean, I'm not going to lie through my teeth and say I don't enjoy hunting and I don't enjoy chasing the animal. But that moment you no longer feel that switch go off, you need to change something. Now, I will say this, though. The only reason I don't go 100%, this question I get more than anything, are you going 100% recurve? And to everybody that asks me that, I say no. only reason is I didn't switch. I started shooting traditional to be a more well-rounded archer, not to go one-dimensional. Beforehand I was strictly compound. I didn't shoot a crossbow. I didn't shoot a rifle. I was strictly a compound shooter. And I felt so one-dimensional. I felt so just one-sided in archery. And so I added in the element. Now, I will say this, 75% of my hunting will be with a recurve or a longbow. 75% of my hunting will be, but I didn't want to be stuck in archery. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like we get to that place with a compound or whatever it is you shoot, you get stuck, and there's no more pushing yourself. Sure, you can go further distances with a compound. You can go out to 100, 120. But even we were talking, there comes a place where you just hit the kill zone at 120, and you're like, I hit it, now what? And unless you're going to go straight James Jean and start doing crazy stuff, you feel stuck. And I felt stuck in archery. There was nowhere else to go. Now, please don't start calling me. I understand no matter what, it's hard to go out and shoot an elk with a compound or a mule deer or a blacktail. I know that it's hard and that's a challenge. It's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying inside of shooting a compound there's no more challenges.
Right.
But I'm just saying I personally felt stuck. There was no challenge in going out and shooting anymore. And so that's why I started shooting a traditional bow to be more well-rounded. And so I don't want to limit myself to just a traditional bow.
Sure. Yeah, and I, personally, I like to eat venison. Venison helps feed my family. I love eating it. It's a great food source for us. So when I come up empty-handed, which happens a lot because I limit myself by using a traditional bow, the shot opportunities are fewer and farther between. So at rifle season comes along, if I've got a tag and I want to fill it, I have very little hesitation about picking up a rifle and dropping a doe for the venison. That doesn't bother me a bit. I am a bow hunter and I am a traditional bow hunter, but I'm also a hunter. I'm also a person who likes to eat venison. So the one thing about switching to traditional archery, at the end of the day, you have to be okay with going home empty-handed.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't. I mean, there are guys out there. Don't get me wrong; they are absolute killers. With no matter what weapon they have, they find a way to get it done. And there are guys out there that fill a ton of tags with traditional equipment every year consistently. I'm not one of them. There are years that I don't fill any tags. There are years that I don't even get a shot opportunity to try and fill a tag. And I'm okay with that. I have come to a point in my life that I want to do it my way. I want to do it with a longbow, and if I don't get it done at the end of the day, I'm okay with that.
Do you only hunt public ground?
No, it's a combination.
Okay.
I have some private ground that I can deer hunt on and turkey hunt on. I do some public land hunting. The private land that I whitetail hunt is very small, and I can burn it out really fast if I'm not careful. So I use a couple of different ways to.
But it's the best. It's the best 2 acres in Kansas.
I don't know about that, but there are deer there.
I will say this though. I've got a 5-acre place, and I've had it for 8 years, and I've never hunted it. There's always been a dog living on the property. And inside of 5 acres, if a deer gets on that 5 acres, a dog does a good job of running it off. So I would have a couple does on camera, a couple decent little stringy bucks, nothing special. It's 5 acres. And my wife decided she wanted to start bow hunting this year. And I'm like, well, I'll go out there and I'll check out that place. Well, the dog was gone. That helped.
Yeah.
And might I add you, there's a house inside the 5 acres. So literally anywhere you hunt, you're 100 yards from a house. But I set some corn up and I set a camera out just to get some pictures, some inventory. And I go out a week later and I'm like, holy crap. There's shooter after shooter after shooter. And I'm like, good Lord. I mean, I'm talking a couple of them 150s. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so 5 acres, man. Don't put your nose down to it.
Yeah. Well, this isn't 5. This area that I'm talking about is about 60 acres, and it's a challenging spot to hunt. The way that there's a ridge that runs north and south, and the winds swirl along that ridge in the timber really bad, and it's a difficult property to hunt, but it does hold deer, and it is a blast to hunt. But it's not massive. So if you hunt it too hard, you hunt it when the wind's wrong, or you catch that swirling wind rolling down through there, it can change things. And so you got to have options.
Yeah. No, I get that. Before we move on, shout out to our boys over at Selway Archery. We were out shooting, and I said, well, listen, I don't know about you yet as a person, but you're a Selway guy, so that helps. And I'm obviously never going to say any other brand names, but we started talking. We've used other traditional quivers in the past, and be it however pretty they are or however fancy they might be, the functionality isn't there as in a Selway. Guys, if you're in traditional archery, I would highly recommend you to check out Selway Archery for whether you're shooting a longbow, recurve, takedown, whatever it is, whether you want a bolt on, a strap on, whether you want a slide on, which in my opinion is the best. Because it acts as a dampener for your bow as well. But whatever it is you're looking for in traditional archery quivers, go check out Selway, especially if you want a custom Razorback branded one. Or like that one, that's my Hunting 101 one there.
Cool.
I like that. Was the first one they ever made me, and it won't ever go on a bow just because it's special to me.
It's very cool.
Special.
Yeah, I'm partial to the slide on as well. That the way that slides on the limbs like that, it acts as a limb saver and cuts vibration like you wouldn't believe.
And it's so tight on there. I mean, it fits. Once you
moves.
get it on. Tip. I'll give you guys a tip. If you do get a slide on and you wonder why it doesn't stay in place, our boy Aaron struggled with that for a while. Why it doesn't stay in place. Just put a little water on your fingers, put them around the limbs, and then it'll allow you to push that on there further, and then it'll dry and stay and it won't move. Just a tip to help you get it on there tighter. But that's beside the point. Now, I'm curious. My problem with the switch lies in the fact that a lot of guys, they have this expectation of, and it's because they buy into the mainstream media hype of traditional archery. And people, they start shooting for 6 months and they get to where they can hit a pie plate, at 20 yards pretty regularly, and they go out and hunt. And then they wound a whole lot of animals. And my problem is, and I'm not speaking as to I've never wounded an animal, and I'm not speaking that I never mess up, I never miss. Told you I missed just 3 days ago on an animal. Ended up following up and killing it, but I missed. I botched a shot, and I'm not saying that. But they continue to buy into the hype of traditional archery, and they continue to wound animals. So vice versa, I had a friend, I'm not going to name any names. He's been on the show several times. People would know him. He made the switch, and he said, I'm going 100%, I'll never look back. Well, he shot 2 turkeys and wounded them both. And so as an ethical hunter, he said, I had to go back. It was either go back or not hunt anymore. And we're, 12 hours from home on a turkey hunt. I had to hunt. And he's like, but I had lost faith in my ability. So I had to go back. I didn't want to. So vice versa, how do you know, okay, I can't make the switch yet. I don't need to be hunting with this yet.
Yeah, I over the years, I've gone through different periods of time where my confidence has been gone. Yeah. Right? I think we all do. We go through seasons in which we're shooting really well. Our confidence is high. And some days you just feel like, you're awesome and you can't miss. Then there's other days in which you can't hit a target to save your life and you get really discouraged and your confidence tanks.
And you want to throw it in the fire pit.
Yeah, and it's a struggle. I mean, that's why some people call it a struggle stick, right? I mean, every day is its own challenge when it comes to picking that up and shooting it. For me, when those moments come, when those seasons of difficult, low confidence come, my effective range decreases.
Very good.
I mean, I have gone out into the woods before telling myself that if I take a shot today, it will be 15 yards or under. And I position myself in a way to where if a shot opportunity is going to be there, it is going to be within my limitations. I've got certain spots on my property that I know this trail, this pinch point will set me up for success at that distance.
Yeah.
I don't set myself on a field edge where I can see hundreds of yards and I'm tempted to take a 35-yard shot when I'm not confident in doing so. So I'll put myself in certain spots where I may not see a deer that's it, but if I do, that deer is going to be right in my lap.
Right.
And so that helps me. It helps me control my temptation to shoot further than I am confident in doing so. And that may change. You know, 1 month my limitation may be 15. The next month it may be 25. And I position myself accordingly to set myself up for success.
See, and I always tell people, they say, what's your effective range? And if you want to go out right now and shoot for dollar bills, I'm going to pick 35, 38, 40 yards to shoot against anybody.
Yeah.
The reason being is because that's my point on is right underneath that. So I really shrink up my point on and I shoot really well at that distance. Like my hog target out back, it's at 31 yards, and even that is a little close. But if I put the one of the targets outside the fence and I'm shooting at 35, 36, I shoot really, really well. Now that is not my effective range, and people are like, well, why not? If that's your favorite shot. Because with a longbow or recurve, a lot can happen in 34 yards. That deer can be completely gone in 34 yards. And so that's not my effective range. Although I shoot it the best at a target, I'm not going to take that shot on an animal. And again, people do, and I'm not saying anything against people who do. If it's a giant, slow animal, absolutely, I'll take that all day. But on a whitetail, on a turkey, no way. On an antelope, definitely not. Because they're so fast, they're so skittish, they're so string shy, a lot can happen. Now, on a bigger, slower animal, sure, I'll poke it. But anyways, I say all that to say this. Know your effective range and then don't shoot a yard past it. Because what happens is these guys, they find out their effective range. They say, okay, I won't shoot anything further than 20. Well, then a giant comes at 22 and they're like, oh, but it's close enough.
Yep.
You know, it's close enough to my effective range.
I'll hit that shot half the time.
Yeah.
Might be this time.
Yeah. And then we play that game of, well, 26, it's not that much further than 20. So the biggest tip, whether you're hunting with a recurve, a compound, a crossbow, a rifle, doesn't matter. Know your effective range and stick to it. My effective range on a whitetail is 24 yards, and I won't shoot further than 24 yards on a whitetail. Be it that's just, people say why, because my antelope target out back is at 24 yards, and I can stack 5 of 6 in a kill zone, or 7 for 8. 8 for 10, you know, whatever it might be. And I feel confident at 24 yards. I actually feel less confident at 7, 8.
Yeah, it's a tough
5,
shot.
because you're shooting 4 feet under the deer, you know, to kill it.
Yeah, it's tough.
So anyways, I say all that to just say, don't give up on it. Now, if you find yourself in a predicament like my buddy, and you know, it's either keep wounding animals or switch to a compound, maybe you've realized I need to give it one more year, or I need to give it one more summer, or I need to give it one more go around, you know, before I dive into this fully.
Yeah. Well, and you know, to be 100% honest, traditional archery is not for everybody, right? I mean, you can try it, give it a go, and maybe it's not the right fit for you, you know, and that's okay. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
I tell people all the time, I'm like, even if you never hunt with it, do it in your backyard. It's fun.
It is fun.
For me, it makes me a better archer with my compound as well. That's a question I get asked a lot too, is if there's any crossover. And I've answered that on the podcast before, so I don't want to dive too deeply into it. But to answer that question, I just say when I switched to a recurve, it forced me to think about every part of my shot. My grip, my hook, my anchor, picking a spot and pulling through the shot.
Yeah, a lot more back tension.
Yeah, it forced me to play all of that. And so in doing that, I fully broke down my shot. So when I switched back to a compound, I had a newly reconstructed shot process, and I had broke down every portion of my shot, and then it transferred over to my compound.
Yeah.
Can you do that without switching? Yeah, 100%. But switching forced me to do that. And so I always tell people, if you never even hunt with it, it's fun to do in the backyard for sure.
Yeah, it is fun.
Unless you shoot the way me and you shot tonight, then it's not fun.
I still had a good time. But, making it fun by, popping balloons, moving targets, like you can do a lot of things that just make it fun, especially if you have kids, Little kids out there can pick up a little, Bear one shot or whatever the entry level Bear longbow is.
Yeah.
And you can go out there and have a great time at short distances, and it's a blast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, my kid goes out there all the time, and even when he was 2 years old, he would shoot his little Nerf bow at it.
Yep.
And yeah, absolutely. And we'll come home from school and he'll say, "Dad, let's go shoot your arrows." And I'm like, "Let's do it, man." And and I'll even let him wear a glove and pull back my bow a little bit, and I'm pulling it back a lot further for him, and I'll say, "Okay, 1, 2, 3," and we'll both release, and he thinks it's the coolest thing ever. And of course, I keep it fun just with the targets. People all the time walk in my backyard and like, "You've got a goblin target?" And I'm like, "My kid loves it. It makes them want to shoot."
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's definitely ways to switch it up without taking a dive off into the deep end.
Yeah. Yeah, back to the hunting thing, though. I will tell you, the most difficult thing that I have faced when shooting traditional equipment, especially deer hunting, turkey hunting
hitting
too.
the target.
No, it's actually not. It's for me personally, the most challenging thing about it is getting to full draw. I have busted. And most of this is because I hunt a lot on the ground, but I have had so many opportunities where I would get busted on the draw and never even get the shot opportunity because things went wrong in me trying to get drawn. And especially on the ground at very close distances, getting drawn back has been the hardest thing that I have had to learn. And it has been such a frustrating experience learning it, but
So what have you learned in that? Like what tips have you learned in that?
mostly patience. I get really, really excited and really anxious. The deer's there within range, and I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for this moment. All of that builds up, and you rush it. You want to get that shot off. You want to capitalize on that moment because that deer's close enough. That deer's finally close enough, and you want to get that shot. And so having to wait till they're looking the other way or their eyes are blocked by a tree or whatever it is has been a big life lesson in patience. And more so
Well,
the
a lot
position.
of that happens in the setup before you ever start hunting.
Yeah.
I've had guys say, "Well, why are you setting up here?" And I say, "Because that tree there, they're gonna have to go behind.
Yep.
When they go behind it, I can draw." And they're like,
Exactly.
I've seen guys set up on a field edge where the deer has nothing to go behind ever at any point, and I'm like, "When do you draw?" And if it's legal and you hunt over bait, I try to position the bait behind a tree. That way, the whole time they're feeding, their head is behind a tree. I still have a perfect shot at the vitals, but perfect example. We went down to Oklahoma, and Aaron was sitting with. I told you we took Joey Zapmary, who is the national champion strongman, out, and Aaron was kind of his coach, and the corn was placed behind a group of 3 trees, and the guy was like, "Well, it's behind a tree," and Aaron's like, "I know, because that way when they're feeding, their heads are down behind a tree the whole time." And we've got all the time in the world to draw a bow back and get a shot at the vitals that are still perfectly out. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, perfect. A lot of that happens before the hunt even begins.
Yep. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I have learned, I like to position myself behind a very large tree to where I can see the direction in which I expect the deer to come from, and then I have a long window in which they're behind that tree that I'm behind, to where I know I can draw, and then they present themselves. But it doesn't always work that way for traditional, because you can only hold that bow back for, a very small, a very short length of time.
Yeah.
And so the timing of how all that works, even if you do everything right and you try and set yourself up for success, sometimes the deer will pause.
Yeah.
Sometimes the shoulder's back and they haven't stepped, they need to take a step, and you're sitting there shaking like a leaf just trying to hang on, and all of a sudden your shot breaks down. And you got to have the self-control to either let down and try again, or the shot opportunity passed and you just have to watch them walk away.
Yeah.
There's just so many things that have to come together to make it work, and that challenge is what drives me.
Do you avoid the shot? This is a loaded question, and I'll get hate over it. Do you avoid the shot altogether if the shoulder's back?
No, depending on the distance.
Good, because me neither.
I'll
just pull it back a little bit further and still punch through the lungs.
If that deer's at 12 yards, I have 0 second thoughts about that shot.
Yeah.
If it's partly quartering away, 0 second thoughts about that shot.
I try to almost always wait for a quartering away shot.
It's a great angle. It's
Almost
a fantastic shot angle.
Yeah, I've had deer completely at broadside, and I'll have the cameraman say, "Why aren't you shooting?" And I'm like, "Just give it a second." Then they take half a step and they're quartering away, and I'm like, "Now I'll shoot it."
Yeah.
It's just, in my opinion, you cannot beat it. You're gonna slip through everything. You're gonna blow the back shoulder out on the way out, and then they can't run with that shoulder, blown out. It's a great shot in my opinion. Sitting here, I'm playing with this knife. You said this is your best-selling style of knife, which, might I add, this one here is my producer's, was my producer's before he even knew it was his. But yeah, he's not getting his hands on this because this thing's stinking sweet. Tell me about it. What is it?
Yeah, so that style that's becoming, I think, one of my most popular it's a small knife. It's 6 inches overall length. The total length of that knife is 6 inches long. Yeah, so the whole concept about this knife and its small size is for a more concealable fixed blade. Everybody loves pocket knives. Everybody loves folders for everyday carry, and for good reason. They're convenient to carry. And that one, I designed a sheath that it's meant to fit inside the pocket. So it
does really well.
Yeah, it has a clip that if you didn't otherwise know and somebody else saw it in your pocket, it looks like a little folder. The presentation is good. And what kind of brought about that whole concept was prior to this, I was making belt loop style carry sheaths. And whether it be a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-inch knife, whatever it was always kind of exterior carry on the belt.
Right.
And I would always carry my own knife, partially for marketing, partially for its functionality at my day-to-day life in my job and around the house or whatever. And there would be moments in time where, so to back up, in my job, I'm in and out of people's homes all day, every day. All types of different people, right? Old people, young people, all different types. And the presentation of a large bearded man, an otherwise intimidating
that
man,
looks like they could go bear hunting with a switch.
The little old lady, so when I say that, I'm thinking of the little old lady, right? The little old lady that answers the door for me to come.
And you got a machete hanging from your side.
Yes, exactly. I've got, even if it's a small knife, just the fact that I have a fixed blade knife on my belt can be intimidating to certain people.
Right.
Or going to church or going to a funeral or whatever the case may be. I always wanted to be carrying one of my knives, but the situation may not call for a presentation like that, where a large leather sheath is hanging off of your belt. So I was like, how can I come up with a way to still carry my knife in all situations? And that's what led to this inside the pocket type of carry. And I tested it out for a long time. I really liked it. and I started making them, started selling them, and other people like it too. It's gone over very well.
I love it. Love it. Fits in your hand really, really well.
Yeah, it's kind of a 3-finger grip. It's not a full hand, but it fits nicely in that 3-finger type of grip.
All right. Before we move on, which I do have some more questions about knives, of course, as I love knives. Quick thank you to our friends over at Three Rivers Archery. Again, somebody else we started talking about, just an absolute fountain of knowledge. So as you make the switch, I would highly recommend you to use them as not only a shop, but a resource. When I was switching, I called those mugs all the time. They're like, yeah, it's stinking Dylan again, kid from Kansas. You take it this time. No, I'm not taking it. You take it. No, I'm just kidding. They're phenomenal. And whether you're going to shop with them or not, they are happy to give out knowledge. They're happy to give out information. And they know everything because they've been there, done that, seen it. They know the equipment because they use the equipment. Largest in-stock selection of traditional archery equipment. Same-day shipping. Absolutely phenomenal. ThreeRiversArchery.com. They also carry a whole lot of cool Bear Archery products, which one is a brand new sign I just got from my coffee bar out there. Just started carrying a traditional Bear Archery sign. Looks incredible. But go check out Three Rivers Archery. Hunting knife. It's no mystery. And I'm not going to lie to you. You're my knife guy. But I like to have a cheap, crappy knife in the bottom of my pack. And I say crappy knife. Like an interchangeable blade knife that if I snap it, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I got to unscrew something, I can use the blade and I'm going to chip it. Oh, well, move on. Throw a new blade on it. I like that. But I also am a huge fan of always having a very well-built knife. One that is sharp, durable, can do everything. I know it's there. I know it's ready. What do you look for in a hunting knife? And I know that's a loaded question because we could talk skinners or we could talk fillet knives or we could talk... but as an everyday in my pack, I need this for the mountain. I need this for whatever. What do you look for in a knife? Like material-wise, quality-wise? If somebody needs a hunting knife, what should they be looking for?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm glad that you were specific about the purpose, the intent of the knife, because I think that's the most important thing whether you're purchasing a fabricated knife or you're having a custom knife built, the intent behind that knife and its purpose, the use for it, is really important. Because there are different knife designs, shapes, sizes, how heavy it is, how thin it is, the edge geometry. There's all kinds of different reasons why this knife is better for that than this other knife. You know, they can be great at a specific purpose, but not for another. But for an all-around general purpose hunting knife, some of the things that shine for me as to what makes that a good all-purpose kind of hunting knife is a couple of things. One is the weight. And this can be very a personal preference thing, whether that blade is heavy or very lightweight, and there's pros and cons to both. But whether it be a really beefy, thick, heavy, beefy blade that you're going to baton and chop saplings down with, or a really thin, light, fast blade, pros and cons to both. But you want to be mindful of that when you go to pick the knife that you want to carry. Do you want it to weigh a lot, or do you want it to be really lightweight? And then, of course, the materials. There are a ton of exquisite hardwoods, exotic hardwoods that are just breathtakingly beautiful.
What is this one?
That is a stabilized box elder burl. And keyword is stabilized, and that's part of... it's a process in which you are replacing the pores, the air pockets in that wood, with a resin that's hardened. So that is a natural hardwood that is beautiful, but it won't absorb moisture like wood would naturally if it wasn't stabilized. So between humidity changes, soaking up blood, cleaning a deer...
Now, I will say I will have one of these in my pocket for hunting this year.
Yeah, it's a fantastic all-around knife. But whether it be a synthetic handle material or a hardwood material, you want to be mindful of the selection that you make, because if, let's say, you're wading through creeks or you're doing a lot of fishing and you end up really wet environment, or you hunt in Oregon and it rains every time you go. Yeah,
there's nothing good about Oregon.
I should have said Washington. How's that?
Two of my coworkers for Pope and Young live in Oregon. I've got to bash them every time I can.
There you go. Then there's a number of situations in which moisture can be a huge factor in the type of knife you pick. Either handle material, sheath material, blade steel. There's so many options out there, and some are better for certain things than others. But my taste, my personal selection is going to be stabilized natural hardwood, because that's most beautiful to me. And it's going to be a thin, a relatively thin blade.
Pretty light, too.
Pretty lightweight. And it's going to be really well balanced. Not going to be real forward heavy, not real, back heavy. It's going to be pretty balanced. And it's going to be wicked sharp.
I just want to throw this at something. Does that make you mad?
No. I mean, I tell you, when I first got into this, I was brutal. I tested my knives so hard because I knew.
Have you made throwing knives yet, though?
Not dedicated throwing knives, but I've thrown my knives.
Have you made Ninja Stars?
No, I haven't. I have not made Ninja Stars.
Well, we'll get on that.
Yeah, something that I could definitely try.
What about throwing hatchets?
No, haven't done that either.
Man, you're slacking, bro.
You don't
do any of the fun stuff.
I've got a full-time job too, so the limited amount of time that I spend on knives is dedicated to filling orders.
Gotcha.
Mostly.
No, I that's the fun stuff though.
It is fun. Yeah.
Now, biggest tip, and this is a hard question, but biggest tip about a knife for hunting, what would that tip be?
Man, that's a tough question. I mean, I don't even know how to answer it. It's got to be sharp, right? Biggest tip that I could give anybody is either know somebody that can sharpen your knives really well, which I would be happy to do for anybody at any time, whether it's my knife or any other knife. I'd love to be able to sharpen it for them. But if a knife's not sharp, it's not worth anything.
What you need to do, though, is if somebody sends you in somebody else's knife, you call the guy back and you're like, dude, this knife, you can't sharpen it. How about I build you one that you can sharpen?
Yeah, I don't know how that would go over, but yeah, I think, biggest tip I can give anybody as far as the knife they carry with them is make it sharp. If it's not sharp,
there's a new belt out. It's by Argali, I think is how you say it. Met him in Portland, Oregon, of all places. Disgusting. No, I'm just kidding. And on the back of this, they've built a really lightweight, backcountry style belt. And on the top of the buckle, there's a stone. So
I have seen that.
Without even taking your belt off, you can just whoosh, whoosh,
yes,
whoosh,
that
whoosh,
is cool.
whoosh, whoosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is very cool. I think that's a brilliant idea.
It is.
Yeah, because even a properly heat-treated knife under heavy use in the backcountry, like, you may want to touch it up before you cape that animal.
Okay, so if your tip is to keep your knife sharp, what's your tip on sharpening knives?
Learn how to do it. Do it right.
You're such a redneck, dude.
Yeah, it takes some practice. It really does. Whether it's a whetstone,
you'll appreciate this though.
Files, whatever it is.
My dad, my entire life. I got to tell the story before we go.
I've heard this story.
What story?
About your dad sharpening knives watching TV.
Yeah, but hold on, it gets better than that. So if you haven't heard, my dad, my entire life, like he would just sit there, you would be watching TV, all you would hear is whoosh, 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 and he'd look over at it, inspect it, whoosh. He loved sharpening knives. He had a passion for it. He loves it, still to this day. One time when he was a young buck, he had just put a fresh blade on a knife. And I'm telling you, like, when he does it, like, he'll spend hours and that thing will be razor sharp, and they're his babies. Anyways, which he'll drool over this. Or he'll look at it and say, decent. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, when he was a young buck, he had just put a new blade on a knife, sharpened it, spent all of his time on it, and he went to walk away and dropped the knife.
On his foot?
And so he's watching this knife fall, and like in everything that's going through his head. And like the seconds that it's falling, he's like, "That's a new blade. I don't want it to hit the concrete." So he sticks his foot out to catch the knife, and it goes right into his boot, into his foot. And everybody that hears that story is like, "Your dad's an idiot," and he'll be like, "But my knife did not get dulled. It didn't hit the concrete, did it?" That's the kind of love my dad has for knives.
Wow. That's dedication.
He would rather stab into his foot than see his blade hit the concrete.
That's some serious dedication.
Yeah. See, I'm brutal on knives, and like, I'm the type of guy that I make dudes like my dad cringe because I'll like pop stuff open or unscrew something with my knife, and you hear it in the blade. But
yeah,
so
I'm that way too.
Ringer for you.
Yeah, I'm that way too. I mean, I when I test these out, I want to make sure that nobody's going to test them harder than I will. And so my daily carry knife, I mean, I put it through the ringer as far as use it to cut carpet, sheetrock, baseboards. I use it as a screwdriver.
Put it in a dishwasher?
No, I have not.
Put it in a clothes washer?
No, I haven't done that either. That probably is something I should do, but I haven't. I'd be curious to know what it would do. Dishwasher, you can almost bet that the scales are going to separate from the tang.
Yeah.
No matter what, just because
so much heat and moisture.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Now, I'll tell you what, though. I'll test it out on this knife, Aaron's knife, my producer. I'll test it out on his knife. And I'll
put it through the washing machine.
I'll let you know how it goes.
I'm sure he'll love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Anyways, my biggest tip on knives, and this is a good one, in my opinion, I keep in my backpack, I keep what I call my kill knife. And that is deadly sharp, ready to cut apart an animal. Mm-hmm. And I keep that in the very back of my backpack. I don't use that for cutting straps. I don't use that for anything else in the field. It's in the very back of my backpack, and the only time it comes out is when it's time to gut an animal or quarter an animal or process an animal. That's the only time it ever comes out. Reason being, it's in the very back spot, so I don't have to worry about like getting it out until it's time. Mm-hmm. I have people all the time, they're like, "Well, how do you get to that without making so much noise in the field?" And I'm like, "Well, it doesn't matter. If I'm getting that knife out, the hunt's over."
Yeah.
But it's back there. I know 100% when I need it, it's going to be sharp. When I need it, I know it'll be ready to go. And I just keep it back there at all times for that. And then you just made me a beautiful everyday grab off my bino harness and slice up whatever I need to slice up. Mm-hmm. That'll be my backcountry pizza slicer.
There you go.
So yeah.
Yeah, for me in the backcountry, I'll have a camp knife that's for food prep, for split and kindling, anything around camp that you would ever need a knife for. It's big, it's strong, it's a large cutting edge. I got my camp knife. And then I got my everything else knife, which would be including processing game. If for whatever reason I happen to be successful, it would be for that purpose. But I would also use it for other things too. It's the one knife I have in the field, and then I have big knife at camp. And so yeah, like we talked earlier, different blades have different purposes, and they're made for specific reasons. And so, camp knife, hunting knife, I carry two as well. Sometimes people will come to me and they'll be like, "I want one knife that'll do it all." And it doesn't exist. I mean, there is no one knife that will do everything. A fillet knife is different than a chef knife. A boning knife, a caping knife, a skinning knife, a camp knife, a general purpose utility knife. Like, they are all different, and they're different for a reason. Yeah. And you got to figure out, either A, I'm going to have multiple knives for different things, or you're going to have to pick pros and cons, what's best for what you want to use it for.
Yeah.
And choose accordingly.
Yeah, I will say, and I get that question about a lot of things, optics, boots.
Sure.
All the time.
Yeah.
And the answer is always the same. There is no one do all. Like, boots is my biggest pet peeve. Like, if I could pick one pair of boots, I'm like, stop.
Seasons change, right?
Yeah, because like if you look behind you there, I've got 4 pair of boots, and I've got my lightweights running gun in Kansas. I've got my pack boots from Schnee's. Now, I can narrow it down. Like I can say 2 pair of boots, grab you a pair of pack boots for really snowy, cold, winter, muddy, muck, and then grab you a pair of bear tooths or whatever. Like I can narrow it down.
Yeah.
Same with knives. Like you're right. You're not going to get a one do-all knife, which is why I have one in my backpack that stays there ready, and then one do-all knife. I mean, that's so you can narrow it down. I mean, you can get there. You can really slim it down. But that's like saying I only want to shoot one arrow. But I shoot a crossbow, I shoot a compound, I shoot a recurve. What arrow should I get?
Yeah. Just
not happening.
Yeah.
Not happening at all. Unless you're shooting a 40-pound compound and a 65-pound recurve, it's impossible. You're not going to find 2. Anyways.
Yeah, and you can get lost in the weeds just on steel type alone.
Yeah.
You know, when knife guys get educated on steels, you know, there are different steels, and there some steels are better for certain things than others. Whether it be a blade steel that I use a lot is 1084. The reason that I like that steel so much is because it's a very easy steel to sharpen. Is it going to hold an edge for as long as a super steel like MagnaCut or SV3 or something like that? No, it's not. But you're not going to have to fight tooth and nail to put that edge back on it.
So is it safe to say, and now we're getting off in the weeds, is it safe to say easier it is to sharpen, faster it dulls?
It's in a very simple form, yeah. There's some forgiveness there that also brings in some durability. You know, it's not 1084 is a very tough steel. It's very forgiving as far as durability. So I think it can take more abuse. You put it through the same torture test as a steel that's got a Rockwell hardness of 64. That's gonna be more brittle. Rockwell hardness of a 58, like 1084, is going to be a little bit more durable to certain testing. So they're
right.
Like when you go down that rabbit hole.
Did you hear where they came up with that scale at?
The Rockwell scale?
Yeah.
No.
Somebody one time hit their knife with a rock and said, "Well, that broke it."
I should have known. I assumed there would be a dad joke in that somewhere, but I wasn't sure. But now I know. You've confirmed that.
Same with I'm trying to think of where it's at in Oklahoma, but you pass a lake, and the exit to get off says La Wada.
Is that right?
And then the next exit take a Lika. And it's because the Indians were driving down the road and they said, "Look, that's a lot of water." And then they stopped and swam and drank, and then they said, "Oh, I got to take a Lika." So they just named the 2 exits.
I'm sure there's probably some mispronunciation 100%, in there somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Or misreading. Anyways, Nick, thank you so much for coming on, man. Where can they find you at?
Facebook at Nick's Knife Works or Instagram at Nick's Knife Works. Very simple.
Where's your website at?
I don't have one yet.
Why not?
It's in the works. I've got people asking me all the time, "Hey, what's your website? How can I order?" And that is a work.
That's part of your other business. Nick's website works.
Yeah, I'm working on it, but yeah, the best way to order right now is just to message me on Facebook or Instagram,
Very
and
cool.
we can talk about it. The biggest thing that is difficult when it comes to custom knives is the wait list. I try and do my best to build them as fast as I can and maintain, the type of quality that I am.
It's worth the wait.
I can only do so much, and so the wait list tends to stack up. Most of the time, it's about a 12-week type of wait. So you have to be a little bit patient, but it's worth it.
So you're telling me my brother only has to wait 12 more weeks to get his everyday carry?
Because
this one's mine.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe so.
Guys, thank you so much for listening. I know we're through the spring hunts for the large majority. Some of you still might be out on some spring hunts. But like me and Nick have talked about, get out there and start preparing for this fall. If you want to start making the switch, it's going to take a lot of work. So get out there and start practicing, start shooting, and know those effective ranges and stick to them. But these summer months are when you're really going to work on those. Get out there and have fun. Guys, thanks for listening. Y'all have a great week.